All right, so I want y'all to think about something. Think to yourself, what is the first sound, song, rhythmic structure that I can remember? You're hearing the heartbeat. You are getting rhythm. You get accustomed to sounds and the rhythm patterns of those sounds. And so you're passing down information before you're even here. That memory is coming from mother to child. So we're getting this information and we're growing up with it, and it just makes sense. We might not be able to explain it, but that way of moving the body, this is how the people in my community move. So when I start dancing, I'm right there with you. You don't have to teach me how to do a dance. It's in my blood. It's in my community. I just do it.
I view dance as the original art form. Man was stamping his feet upon the planet, leaping, spinning. Before we could write, before we could even talk, we were dancing.
Jazz dance, it's the way that we live, breathe, and speak on a daily basis. It's a conversation. It's about seeing the people around you and really feeling with empathy who those people are and understanding how you relate to them through movement.
If jazz is about humanity, and it is, there are infinite ways of being, and we should be allowed to move through all of those spaces and claim jazz. The one thing that I ask of every single person when they're working with this material is, say where you got this stuff from, and if you're not sure, investigate and do the research. In the same way that no one owns jazz, no one's really making up anything that didn't come from someplace. Part of why our history is not understood is because we don't attribute, and we don't call back to what came before. We are always steeped in like now and there, like what's beyond. The history allowed us to get to now, so it's our responsibility to the form to attribute where stuff comes from.
About 20 years ago, way down in New Orleans, a group of fellas found a new kind of music, and they decided to call it jazz. Oh, baby, won't you play me a jazz hot, maybe, and don't ever let it end. I tell you, friend, it's really something to
People
be.
all over the world love jazz dance. They just don't realize that they love jazz dance.
It is very hard to define what jazz is, but then when you see it, you see it.
Liz Thompson used to say, jazz dance is dance's bastard child. And if I can't say that on camera, jazz dance is the illegitimate child of dance.
So, baby, let jazz hot, maybe.
I don't know what's more American than jazz. Enslaved culture, migratory culture, indigenous culture can be found in jazz.
It's such a hodgepodge, a ragu of lots of different things that came into the pot. And so in that very American way, we sort of steal from everybody and find something new.
When people speak, they tend to lie about things, and dance is honest.
It's all of the backgrounds of everybody, and it's really what they feel in their heart and their soul.
Jazz has a heartbeat and a rhythm that makes people move very differently from any other dance form.
Jazz is inspired by the rituals, the rhythms, the sounds, the earth, the community.
What was happening with dance, with jazz, dance, and music here in this country was actually mirroring what was happening in the country historically, politically.
Jazz is always political because it's imagining a future that we could share. And how great could that be?
Whoa, before this time, another.
The culture of dance is deeply embedded in Afro-diasporic people, deeply embedded. We dance, even if there's no performance. It's just in us to dance. It's emotionally freeing. It's how we deal with day-to-day life. It's how we express ourselves through joy, through sorrow, through pain.
You can't dismiss the way that racism has impacted jazz dance. The greatest misfortune that I see today in jazz dance is that a lot of the times the roots aren't acknowledged, and a lot of people don't even know that the movement they're doing is stemming from that place.
The atrocities that a lot of our ancestors had to face, they put into their dance, into their music. They expressed themselves and released their tension and their stress through their art. If they didn't have these outlets, man, I don't know if they would have survived.
We never start African or Latin history at slavery. We start before that. So we look at what was going on in those countries or on those continents before it was interrupted. So when we're looking at the lineage of jazz dance, we take the Juba and the Shika dances of the Nigerian peoples, and we bring that to the United States by way of the transatlantic slave trade.
That's part of what the Middle Passage did that's quite different than how the dances might have developed on the continent, because there's so tiny room for Black Americans to maneuver socially that the embodied movement that becomes jazz takes on that much more potential, possibility, urgency.
So we arrive here and we've got this automatic sense of percussiveness in the body, and how important that became when you're also thinking about a group of people whose cultural practices were taken away from them. Now you're just who you are as a person, devoid of what your once identity was in your original country.
For slaves, their dance and their music was all they owned for themselves.
It could reach the hypnotic level of releasing them to that other place where they weren't slaves, where they were free.
The Slave Act of 1739 wouldn't allow Africans to use drums, and the reason was the revolt that was organized in this year was organized by playing drums. They communicated with each other with different rhythms. And so after that, if any African was caught playing drums, their hands were cut off. So this rhythm and this music, this spirit was then redistributed throughout the body.
Juba is a social dance that started on the plantation. What they did was use their bodies to make the sounds and to still communicate with each other and really continue that community.
So patting Juba almost immediately sets a standard for jazz as this exploration of rhythm and playful fun, but also political possibility. So information can be shared through how the rhythm is disrupted or arranged.
And that grew into more social dances where you entertain the idea of being elevated, of being white, of mimicking European court dances. So that's where the cakewalk evolved from.
The cakewalk was a dance done on plantations where the Africans who were enslaved at the time would literally make fun of their masters. They would present themselves and their partner, and they would be dressed in a certain way. And so Africans would create these dances to mimic and imitate them.
It was a way for the enslaved Africans to resist, and in a moment of oppression, they found a way to release and to find humor and joy.
The cakewalk is the foundation for all of Broadway dancing, and thus the foundation for jazz. The cakewalk is the revolutionary moment where something new is produced by this American experiment, if you will, but also this way that Black Americans are disavowed and pushed to this place where creativity is aligned with political possibility. Black Americans had zero possibilities for a professional life. We have our first forms of occupations around minstrel shows. So the foundational avenues of employment that lead to jazz dance are tied up in this history of denigration and of flattening the complex social and political lives of a really diverse group of people into two-dimensional stereotypes.
The traits of jazz dance are variations in rhythmic patterns. Because when you think of jazz, jazz moves, it speeds up, it slows down, it has a variation. So it's not just one thing.
And what jazz is it took this African predisposition to syncopate, if you will, to overlay a rhythm different from this ground rhythm, and it made the rhythmic life of jazz dancing filled with surprises.
I think one of the key tenets of jazz is improvisation.
Without you bringing your own interpretation of it, it's not jazz.
You are not up here like in ballet. You are down there. You are digging on the ground. That power, that passion, that sex. What else is there in life?
The great significant trait is polyrhythm, meaning there's a beat going on, the boom, 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 boom. You know, if that just keeps going on and keeps going on, we're gonna fall asleep. But what the jazz people did was individuated against it. Con, 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 cat, 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 cat.
The Harlem Renaissance, we look at it as the African-American Enlightenment movement in the United States. Circa the 1920s, you've got music, dance, philosophers, writers, all doing great things at the same time. And during this time, there was a very big racial divide. But in New York, there were white bodies that were really interested in being a part of the movement.
Black America was setting the trend then, like we are now. The Savoy Ballroom in New York was one of the first places where they could not stop whites from coming and having this wonderful socialization with blacks over dance. It was unheard of, but you couldn't stop it. It was just so hot up in that ballroom.
The Savoy Ballroom. It was the very first integrated public space in the United States. The dancing was so extreme that they had to replace the floor every 3 years.
And it would just be people dancing to classical jazz music, doing swing dances, jitterbug, Lindy Hop, all the dances that you imagine when you think about the origins of jazz dance.
There is a dance, there is a social dance that comes from the community, that lives in the heart. It's in your blood, it's in your spirit.
It's that vernacular dance that was homegrown, that comes right out of the streets, and it's infectious, it's joyful, and it relates and connects to what's happening socially, politically, culturally at any given time period.
These social dances evolved from the plantation dances of the enslaved Africans, and then were embellished and performed on stage, and national dance crazes evolved, like the Charleston and the Lindy Hop.
Lindy Hop is social dancing. The dance movements come from the community. Lindy was everybody come to the club, learn what it is, and you can add your own signature thing to it that influences everybody else to be as creative as you're being, and you're all dancing.
We're disenfranchised in most parts of this city, but we get to go to this ballroom and we get to compete against each other, and it's about pride, and it's about reputation, it's about self-esteem, and we're expressing it through movement.
This was really the time when black and white bodies were in conversation with each other. Kind of became okay for a girl from upstate to New York to start moving her hips in that way. And the Harlem Renaissance was really the beginnings of those conversations.
We get to the 1930s, and there are progressive whites who are curious about black culture, not only the parts that they're allowed to see, but something closer to how black Americans imagine themselves among themselves. And these ballrooms make this possible. And then we start to get towards jazz dance. Broadway changes, the dances on Broadway start to look more like the dances that African Americans do at home. They get more rhythmically sophisticated, they get less knowable and more open, and then we really see a shift. And this happens up until the Second World War.
You can't talk about American success without tap dance being a part of that story. It's important for people to know that it came out of a place of struggle and oppression. It wasn't just this happy dance that was made for other people's enjoyment. It was made to express and to communicate a certain feeling.
There's always been a big argument whether it was tap dance that created jazz or jazz that created a tap dance.
Tap dance is older than jazz, and it led to certain social dance forms like Lindy Hop and swing dance, which then led to jazz dance.
There's also a relationship between African and Irish culture where we see this percussiveness coming into play with Irish traditional jig dances and also African juba interplaying with each other.
The roots of tap are African dance, West African dance 2.0. It's what happens when you take a culture and a style and you put it in a different part of the world, and you put the people that experience that art under extreme pressure and under the worst conditions humanly possible.
Most black people in America can tap. I don't know. It's just a thing. You're born, you're black, you can tap. Don't get me wrong. I love to dance. Love to dance. And I got work. I was cute. Cute little colored kid. call us colored in those days. Cute little colored kid tapping away. Oh, I was a real novelty. Of course, by the time I grew up, it was a different story. He's an adult black man now. He's not so cute. Give him a broom.
Raymond.
The rich don't patronize tap.
There's a little bit of a fear still to embrace tap dance culture entirely because of the ugly history that it's attached to, which is American history. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are willing to face the truths of what happened or is happening right now in this country. And we're always going to reflect those truths, whether or not they can handle them.
It's kind of impossible to talk about jazz dancing independent of the music, because the music truly, through the ages, defined how the dance would go.
This to me could also come through as how important is oxygen and nourishment.
Every person in my family was a classical musician, and to hear that jazz music, something shifted really deep in my soul. There is an emotionality and a depth that is in that music for me that I'm always trying to get to and to be able to describe with movement, because there is such honesty, such heart honesty.
When I hear that sound as a choreographer, that springs images and movement in my head and makes my body, gives me that invitation that I feel jazz music does.
Jazz music has all the accents and the moments that happen in between that you don't expect, and being off the beat and being pushed, and just all the variation of styles and percussive nature and elongated notes. It's all in there, which physically, as a dancer, you can relate to and connect to.
At one time, the music, jazz dance and jazz music went together, and the dancers were performing to live music. And there was an exchange between the musicians and the dancers.
It is so overwhelmingly fulfilling to dance with a jazz orchestra live. I don't think there's anything like it, because you're an extension of that music. It's powerful.
Years and years ago, jazz music was to move to. It was to dance to. And then as people doing improvisations got more and more adept, then it became about, look at my skill in improvising and maybe not quite so danceable.
And then bebop.
And then bebop messed it up.
For jazz dance.
The musicians of bebop messed it up.
Yeah.
And as the music changes over time, as the styles change, then the dancing that's done to the popular music, popular styles also changes.
The music got too crazy to dance to, really. So music and dance went their separate ways.
Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better
The
chase all
jazz
your
dance
cares
that we all iconically know from the Hollywood days. That's different than the jazz dance of the Roaring '20s.
The sun is shining, come on, get happy.
During that time when Hollywood was during its golden age, that was after World War II. The whole world was in turmoil and needed some uplifting and some joy.
Wash your sins away in the tide.
The idea of male role models for dancers was few and far between. I didn't know any professional dancers. I didn't know any male dancers. I was the only boy in my school, but I knew who Gene Kelly was. I knew who Fred Astaire was.
Just those character men and women that I really, that's what I wanted to do.
My mother would watch old movies, and I fell in love with a movie I didn't know the name of at the time, but of course everybody knows it, which is Singing in the Rain. I liked Gene Kelly a lot. The way he was, I guess, his articulation, the way he was accentuating the music, but then also his character and the way he was telling the story always, and how the dance was kind of infused into the storyline. And I got kind of drawn to that.
Gene is athletic and masculine, and it always felt like watching the Olympics, watching him dance. And Fred is beautiful and elegant and non-threatening. You know, he's romantic, and yeah, they were the two different qualities and the two different male dancers that I grew up watching.
And then I also grew up watching movie musicals. So, you know, I'm seeing Fred Astaire, I'm seeing the Nicholas Brothers, I'm seeing Bill Robinson, I'm seeing all these famous dancers, and I'm seeing very vivid colors and sets and costuming. And as a kid, it's like watching cartoons, it just grabs you.
I would kill to be Sid Charisse's partner. I would kill for that.
What happened in the 1940s and 50s that is a turning point for jazz is it started to be codified. Now, what's interesting about this is that it could almost never be codified by Black Americans because we still didn't have access to courts of law or legal systems of support. So almost all the jazz dance techniques are initiated by white men.
There are like two different worlds. The worlds where ballet and extensions and turns, batmas are valued, training is valued. And then there's the social swing dance world. And it's like two different worlds, but the swing dancers understand the vernacular vocabulary and the evolution of jazz. What happened was that the modern dancers and the ballet dancers got a hold of jazz, pulled it into the studios and made it be what they wanted to do, and they called it jazz.
And we had ballet choreographers or modern dance choreographers who were doing their interpretation of what they consider jazz to be. And then you have critics who are writing about what they think jazz is, not having any historical reference to the form or any connection to the work. Now, how does that change how society thinks or believes what jazz to be? And how does that change the form and evolve it of what it was? And who was instrumental in that?
There were two big streams, people who felt that jazz dance was this original vernacular form that only happened in the 20s to the 40s. And then there were people who felt that jazz evolved and jazz became something different over time, but it's still jazz.
Something else about how Black American social structure works is that we believe in each other and sharing. It's communal. We don't really have long traditions of individual ownership. We're not so big up on claiming it as our technique or our style or this is my dance and no one else's. That's quite a European American formation or a capitalist formation. So there's a real problem when people start naming names and saying this is who invented a step or a style or made a technique. And Black American culture, it just doesn't operate that way.
So it's hard in jazz dance, because we know it comes from a lot of that lineage, to really put a thumb on who the mother or father is. Although in America, we tend to give the credit to Jack Cole. But I think when we look at the true origins of jazz, that may not be the right lens through which to look at how jazz came about. So around the 1940s, Jack Cole is looking at classical Indian forms and starting to incorporate that into his jazz dance movement. So you see this idea of isolation that is indigenous to jazz dancing. A lot of that really starts there, where the head may move from side to side, the arms may have some very particular angular motions to them. And Jack Cole was taking a lot of these ideas and incorporating it into his choreography and the dances that he was creating.
1, 2, 3, 4. I saw Mr. Cole in a convention, this kind of tall-ish, evil-tempered person, but which is intriguing. And everyone seemed to be in love with that kind of antagonistic attitude, maybe? We didn't know who he was. He came in with boots, khakis, a tied shirt, and a drum, and he was crazy. 7, 8, walk. 2, 2, 3, 2, work 3. Jack Cole created a technique Was it taken from Ted Shawn, Ruth St. Denis, the Dinashon years? Yes, absolutely. Everyone that was involved in his life, did he put into his pot? They didn't call their stuff jazz. Sell those bananas. Let's do it again, ladies. When you look at Marilyn Monroe today, it was Jack Cole who gave her that persona. Rita Hayworth, same thing. Marilyn wouldn't do it without him. If you go and you'll look at Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and you'll look at Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, she is never looking into the camera, ever, because he's over here and he's doing it with her. But when you think about that, oh, what? Then you look at it and you go, it's amazing, because she's not playing to a camera. She's taking from the master. And they had a connection that was like no other. He wanted audiences to understand what dance was all about. Dance didn't have a prominence. It was background material. The stars were the most important thing, and not the dance.
You can't talk about jazz dance in America without talking about Katherine Dunham. I know you're going to talk about Jack Cole, but you got to talk about Katherine Dunham. For us, she is the mother of all dance in America, because it is that African heartbeat that has defined the style of America to the world. She was influenced by Afro-Caribbean movements combined with Graham and classical ballet. And she, not unlike Jack Cole, had studied Eastern dance.
She actually started as an anthropologist, and through her studies in anthropology, that led her to dance, because she realized dance was one of the oldest things that humans have been doing on this planet.
Americans have this puritanical ideas about the body and about sex. And because it was so, it wasn't sexy, but it was so sensual, they completely devalued what she was doing, even though it was just extraordinary. She was a scholar, researcher, made a phenomenal movement. I mean, the Dunham technique is just breathtaking, but they just devalued it.
As a child growing up in Houston, Texas in the 50s, everything was segregated. Water fountains, white only. Movie theaters, white only. Restaurants, white only. And the dance schools were no different. They were not really allowing black children to train and dance with white children. I went to the local school, Mr. DeBatto, and I learned tap dancing and a little ballet. But I had a bigger image of what I wanted to learn. And it was actually Patrick Swayze's mom, Patsy Swayze, who taught jazz dance, who saw me outside of her school. I was peeping through the window, and she, in that wonderful southern drawl, "Little girl, what you doing out here? Can you dance?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, bring your shoes tomorrow." And so she allowed me to come and take the class.
I just happened to see a dance performance, and I was fortunate enough to meet the principal dancer, who was Debbie Allen. And she was from Houston like me, so I asked her, where can I learn to do this? And she told me, you need to go see a woman by the name of Patsy Swayze, because unfortunately at that time, or fortunately for us, she was the only dance teacher in the entire state of Texas that would accept black people in her school. Patsy was considered to be one of the prominent jazz dance teachers, and from my understanding, Patsy had basically based her work on the teacher that she had studied with, who was Matt Maddox at that time.
Matt never called his work jazz dance. He was of the thinking real jazz dance is the social and vernacular forms of jazz. Back in the late 1940s, Eugene Loring was creating a class called freestyle, where he's saying, I want to take the best of ballet, the best of modern, the best of jazz, the best of this, and put them in together to one American form of dance. So Matt was there during that process and would teach there. So eventually, when Matt left, he had that from Loring, and then he had worked with Jack Cole, so he had the style of Jack Cole, and those two things came together in his later teaching.
Devant et gauche et derrière les bras, à droite.
I heard someone beating a drum, one of those tom-tom drums down the hall, and I said, who is beating this drum every day I come to class? And they said, that's a class called mathematics, a jazz teacher. So I opened the door, and I went in, I listened, and I saw all these isolations and the training. They stood in one spot for almost half an hour, 45 minutes, just doing body isolation, head, shoulders, rib cage, hips, legs parallel, legs turned out, arms, all these different positions. I said, that's close to ballet. To me, that was the closest thing to ballet technique I could get. And so that's where I started.
So Matt was taking these ideas from Jack Cole. He said, when I first started teaching in New York, I was teaching for 2 years anything I learned from Jack Cole, and the students could not do it because of the isolated nature of the movement. And that's when he said, how do I make up exercises so they figure out how to move individual parts of their body? So between head, shoulders, rib cage, pelvis, those were, the things that led him to create the exercises that he did.
Accent, reflex, rhythm, dynamics, relax.
Matt and Jack did not want any expressions in the face. No expression. Keep that all inside. And I wanted to express what I was feeling. Matt would say, why are you smiling, Nat? I said, because I can feel this. I'm enjoying the music. No smiles. Cut.
Matt was a very integre and simple and truth man. He never tried to be false or to use, he was always doubting about himself and trying always to get better, because it was never enough, And I have learned that about him. I have a great respect and love. Each people who teach his technique teach the way they understand it. And then they put back with it their own sensibility.
One of my teachers in Calgary came back from New York with this crazy technique, and she'd been studying with mathematics. And so she was a very thorough teacher, and we were really immersed in Matt's technique. Then at one point, she came back from her New York travels, and all of a sudden we had our arms above our head, and we were stretching this way. And we started doing Luigi work.
The Luigi technique, much of the most important draw about it was the man himself.
First port de bras. 5, 6.
Luigi had been in a car accident, and he was paralyzed on one side of his body. And the doctors told him he would never walk again. And determined to dance again, because he was a dancer, he developed a way of rehabilitating his body.
His exercises were much more of a serious nature because of what they had to do. His technique had to rebuild a really broken spirit and a really broken body.
He used the image of pressing down on the bar, right? There would be this imaginary bar, and he would press down on it and use it to lift his weight out of the paralyzed leg.
Both arms in front of you.
He would start out at the bar, use the bar for support, do these exercises, and then step away from the bar and press down on this imaginary bar. And that is the foundation of the technique, this idea of using the space in the room for the support.
Passe. Down,
and so he would do these exercises extremely slowly and talk about what everything felt like. It really was not about what it looked like. It was about what it felt like.
Now 15 seconds.
The energy in that room was not like anybody else's class. He was really, really remarkable in that way.
He was so intensely involved in it that it was infectious. Like when he starts moving his chest and shoulders, it was like you could see he was in a trance practically. And we just loved it. I mean, I had to follow that. And I did for quite a while.
And 5, 6, 7, brush. A 1, 2, toe heel. Toe heel. Passe back. Brush. Repeat. Toe heel.
It's complicated to try to understand how Latin rhythms or Latin expression becomes embedded inside something we think of as jazz. So many of the enslaved African people were brought through the Middle Passage to the Caribbean, and most Africans were then stolen to South America. So these affiliations and sort of windings through and sharings are as old as the slave trade.
These are rhythms that came into Brazil and into the Caribbean and into New Orleans, and they're starting to fuse them. And people say, oh, it's new music, oh, it's new music. But really, it's more like a great reunion of a culture of music that was once one.
Cuban music had a great influence on jazz. Then when the bars went up on Cuba, American jazz switched to Brazilian music for its influences. And so then we started having cool jazz.
There's something about musicality and syncopation that excites me. I was doing a show and the songwriter, he was on my case about everything being so syncopated. I was talking about my father who's from Brazil, and he said, oh, that's what it is. You're Brazilian. That's where all your syncopation comes from. That's why you're driving me crazy with this syncopation.
Some of these innovators start to claim Latin as kind of their difference in jazz. But if we really want to understand, I mean, that starts from the beginning.
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the 70s. I went to a little dance school. And so like many other kids in America, I started with tap ballet. I started when I was 3. And in my teenage years, I went to Giordano's in Chicago. That was the first time I'd gone away from home, but it was the first time also I felt like an adult in class and really had a mentality and a fighting thing that was underneath to say, you can do this.
From Gus, I learned discipline. I learned that the body has to balance in a certain way. It has to move and counter move. And those disciplines were not what I was used to in the freestyle improvising of street dancing.
The markers of the Giordano technique, the movement comes from the pelvis, and that's where everything comes from. So it's got a very organic quality. It's combining the groundedness, coming influence from Africa, with the ballet world, very technical, and you have to have amazing technique. And then the modern world, it's really a combination of the major dance disciplines. It's got to be real. That was a slogan that my father continually said. The way that he lived his life was with energy, power, radiant, and touching people's lives through jazz dance.
There's a misconception about the relationship between ballet and jazz. And it's really important that people understand that there has been this kind of very deep relationship that George Balanchine had with the jazz dancing body. Balanchine had direct contact with some of these black bodies during the time of the Harlem Renaissance. Josephine Baker, she was a very prominent artist in the United States. Well, what Balanchine appreciated about Josephine was her ability to get down, that polycentric body, multiple centers in the body that could articulate and speak to each other all at the same time. And so he was looking at ballet and deciding that he wanted to make something new. Thought, well, what if I take these Africanist aesthetics from this particular body and the jazz dancing body, and I incorporate that into ballet? What does that do to take ballet off of its axis?
Somebody like Jerome Robbins, his jazz is absolutely based in ballet, but he's taken on that jazz to exemplify the character that is being portrayed.
Robbins is made by virtue of the fact that he was rejected from School of American Ballet, which is the New York City Ballet School, the Balanchine School. He was rejected from there. And he gets his start with Gluck Sandor, who's teaching modern dance.
A friend of mine said, oh, you've got to see this
she called it musical comedy. I said, I hate musical comedies.
Oh, I was such a snob too.
Oh my God, my chignon, my first position.
It's disgusting.
I had never seen
Disgusting.
it. I had never seen a musical in my life. I had never been. The only musicals I've seen is movies, you know. And there were one about, that's not for me. She said, but I think you should see this. It was done by Jerome Robbins. So when she said it's choreographed and directed by Jerome, I said, I'll go.
Yeah.
And I saw West Side Story. And that changed my life. I went out of the Sarah Bernard Theater, sat by the sand, by the river, and said, I have to go to New York to study that. And that's what I did.